guys, I'm Nika Chung. Welcome back to my channel, Chaplin.
You might be Chaplin after all.
Onto the stage right now!
Chaplin!
What do we do, Charlie?
Smile.
Directed by Richard Attenborough, that we know as his famous character, John Hammond, for 3 Jurassic Park movies. This is based on my autobiography, Chaplin Book and Chaplin, His Life and Art by David Robertson. And it's starring a powerhouse cast, Robert Downey Jr., Dan Aykroyd, Anthony Hopkins, Geraldine Chaplin, and many more. This story is about one of the most important figures in history of the film industry. During his career in the film silent era that spanned more than 50 years, from childhood in the Victorian era, he was an actor, comedian, filmmaker, composer that made us laugh. The film is structured around the flashbacks as the elderly Charlie Chaplin is living in Switzerland, narrates his life to his autobiographer editor, including the rise to wealth, comedic fame from poverty, and his turbulent personal life, and his run-ins with the FBI that revoked his passport. At London's Music Hall in Aldershot, England in 1894, his mother, Hannah Chaplin, was performing, but during her performance, she had an attack of nerves on stage. Adorable 4-year-old Charlie Chaplin takes his mother's place on the stage performing Honeysuckle and the Bee. The audience loved him. He was a natural. And several years later, Hannah retires from performing and eventually is committed to an asylum after developing psychosis. In the years that follow, Chaplin and his brother Sidney Gain work with the variety show producer Fred Kano, where Chaplin becomes a huge hit with his comedy drunk act. He begins a relationship with his first love, Hetty Kelly. The night before he's due to leave for America, he proposes to her, but she declines, reasoning she is too young. Chaplin promises to return to England for her when he becomes successful. Chaplin is sent to America by Cardinal and is given a job by Max Sennett, the most famous comedy producer in Hollywood. You know, there's actually a Canadian connection. He's originally from Montreal, and Dan Aykroyd plays Max Sennett, so that's pretty cool. While they're using his pratfalls and vaudeville comedic acts to impress the producers, he creates this iconic tramp persona, and due to the terrible directional abilities of Sennett's girlfriend Mabel Nomad, Chaplin is allowed to direct his own movies. Before the year is over, Chaplin directed over 20 movies after Sidney joins him in America to become his manager. Chaplin decides to break away from Sennett to have complete creative control over his films with the goal of one day owning his studio. This was definitely one of the most coolest scenes. We finally get to see how the tramp was created, and Charlie is a genius. Like, he was looking around the studio and he just sees bits and pieces of like a hat, the cane, and definitely the mustache was definitely the big deal there. But definitely when the outfit came together, that was iconic. And let's not forget those shoes when he's like waddling. When he just comes in, waddling in, that was like, oh my gosh, that is Chaplin right there. I love the way how Robert Downey Jr. really portrayed this character. It felt like you're actually watching Chaplin in real life. I learned about Chaplin when I first watched The Circus and Modern Times. I really enjoyed both those movies, but I was truly invested in this story of an iconic figure at such a young age, dealing with hardship, being put in the workhouse, his family, but through all of that, he stayed on the right path. At 14, he knew he was destined to be something great, and he achieved so much at a young age. In 1917, Charlie Chaplin Studio was built by the famous comedian after he signed with First National in 1917, his very first independent production deal. He did controversial films that nobody would ever do or think of, especially around the time in 1944, World War II, because of the backlash, or even worse, getting blacklisted from Hollywood. I can't believe they were really hunting him for his film, The Kid. They traveled undercover all the way in Utah to edit this film, but that was an epic escape when he just jumped right into the car. But during the Great Depression, the fans loved his movies and brought a smile to everyone around the world. He was a genius that was so dedicated to his work, barely had time for the women that he married, but finally did settle with Una. Although this was a long film, but it was entertaining and I enjoyed every moment of it, and I love the song Honeysuckle and the Bee. You are my honey, honeysuckle, I am the bee. It's a really beautiful song. I couldn't help it. The acting is really good. Robert Downey Jr. succeeds almost uncannily into playing Chaplin. The physical resemblance is convincing, but better is the way Downey captures Chaplin's spirit, even in the costume as the tramp. And let's not forget that British accent. The production values are impressive, the period sets are meticulously convincing, The powerhouse ensemble talent were excellent in their roles, especially Geraldine Chaplin playing her own grandmother, Calvin Klein as Douglas Fairbanks, and James Woods as Chaplin's attorney. He was really funny. And the scenes depicting the Depression years and Chaplin's return to London border on the smalls. But the last scene where an elderly Chaplin accepts an honorary Academy Award ends the movie with excellence. They really honored him really well with the longest standing ovation. Here are some interesting facts you may know or may not know about the making of Chaplin. While researching his role, Robert Downey Jr. visited the Museum of Moving Image in London, England, and persuaded the staff to let him try on one of Charlie Chaplin's little tramp suits and boots. It fit him so perfectly, and he found a cigar stub in one of the pockets, which he subsequently treasured. Robert Downey Jr. recorded the song Smile, which can be heard on the soundtrack from the movie, however, it's not used in the movie. That is really interesting though. I never knew Robert Downey Jr. actually sang a song. This I gotta check out. Geraldine Chaplin recalled that when she first saw Robert Downey Jr. in full costume, she was so awestruck on how much he resembled her late father that she needed a moment to collect her thoughts to even speak. He does look like Charlie Chaplin, and he brought him to life. This is not a part of the list, but actually I discovered that the Charlie Chaplin studio is now home to Jim Henson Company in 1999 and have the statue of Kermit the Frog dressing as Chaplin at the entrance, and there's a painting of him popping at the front door and footprints around the studio, and of course photos inside. I wish I had the opportunity to visit this historical studio. This is the place where Charlie Chaplin made all of his movies, and now it's owned to the Muppets, and I'm glad that they honored him, by leaving some elements of Chaplin as well. So it's a combination of both. You're seeing the Muppets, and of course you're seeing a little bit of Chaplin. And of course, seeing the Muppets. I love the Muppets. Kermit, Miss Piggy, Gonzo, Foxy the Bear are my favorites. Oh, there are two more characters I do like. They're the older gentlemen. I don't know their names, but they make fun of everyone. Those ones are my favorites too. I would love to visit the Jim Henson studio, but since I live all the way in Canada, on top of that, we're in a world pandemic, it's a lot harder, but at least I can look at some pictures and check out some videos on YouTube about the studio. So that's the least I can do in the meantime. This was one of the best biopic films. I enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. You'll have a good time watching Chaplin, and if you want to know more about Chaplin, watch his silent films. I'm Anika Chung, and I'll see you next time on my next movie or trailer review. Love yourself always, and remember, be excellent to each other. Alright guys, see you on the next one. Cheers!